Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast with your hosts, Betsy Westhafer and Tony Bodo. Join Betsy and Tony as they dive in with highly successful C-suite leaders who have grown successful organizations by creating a laser focus on listening to their customers and building deep customer relationships. Now, it's time to join Betsy and Tony for the Really Know Your Customer show.
Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast. I am Tony Bodo, CEO of Tony Bodo International.
And I'm Betsy Westhafer, CEO of the Congruity Group. We're so happy to have you on our show today.
You know, Betsy, I am excited for the show. We are going to talk about an area that you and I haven't even ever covered before in this, which is interesting to say because we're something like 48 episodes in or so. I forget exactly where we're at today. But what's beautiful about this episode is that Tony Sternberg takes us through what his company does to really create a cancellation experience. And it's a space that, you know, I haven't heard people talk about a lot before. It's usually when companies cancel or when customers cancel, you know, maybe they get followed up with a survey, tell us how we did, or, you know, a follow-up email at some point, or maybe there's a marketing campaign 6 months from now that tries to pull them back in. But there's not really this thought around what is that experience when they cancel? What can we learn about them? What can we understand? How can we maybe make things better? How do we keep them, right? A lot of people talk about retention, but they don't really have a strategy and the tactics in place to really manage that well. And so I love the conversation we had with Tony, and I can't wait to get into the conversation.
Yeah, a couple of things, Tony, to add on to that is one, the data that they're getting, to use this data to make strategic decisions moving forward. And he points to a couple of really great examples about how the data that ProsperStack helps them get helps inform them on roadmap, on all kinds of other things that they have, pricing, that they have actual data from customers to support their strategic initiatives moving forward. The other thing that really caught my attention is just how what they do and the growth of all things customer, how it's really organization wide, how, you know, what they're doing might start off with the customer success team, but then it does filter over to product and marketing and the C-suite. And so I really love, you know, with us living in this whole world of all things customers, I just love that there are solutions out there that are not in, you know, the little box in the organization, that it's really something that infiltrates the whole company. So without further ado, let's meet Tony Sternberg, co-founder and CEO of ProsperStack. Welcome, Tony. We are so excited to talk to you today. There's so much good stuff to chat about. And so welcome to the show.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you could just kind of kick us off by giving the audience your background, what led you to where you are today, your lessons learned along the way, help us learn who you are.
Yeah. So, my name's Tony. I'm one of the co-founders at ProsperStack. And what we do is we help subscription businesses retain customers at the point of cancellation, and then also provide a data platform where they can learn from that information they're gathering and hopefully make better decisions down the road. I've been in SaaS since 2007, and that's really kind of what led me up to this point today. You know, I took a job at a pretty early startup company. It was one of the first few employees, and, you know, starting there and kind of growing up with that company, serving a lot of different roles, as you can imagine in a startup, you know, anything from support to testing to product to operations. I just knew early on that once I kind of got into SaaS that this is where I wanted to stay, just seeing it kind of explode and grow over the years. So yeah, that's kind of a lot of what led me up to this point.
Great. Well, tell us more about ProsperStack.
Yeah. So ProsperStack, as I mentioned, is a automated retention platform. So what we do is we work very closely with different billing management software out there. So like a Stripe, for example, we integrate very closely with them and offer a low-code offboarding solution for our customers. They can basically build cancellation flows within our product and make all sorts of different changes. We can leverage data that not only exists in a platform like Stripe, but also outside of them with various other integrations we have, and then segment customers and then give them unique cancellation experiences that are going to leverage that segment, combine it with feedback that we're collecting from them, and then ultimately try to give them incentives and offers to retain them as customers versus letting them churn. So we really want to overcome whatever that issue has. And sometimes that might mean we're offering a coupon. It might mean that we're offering a service intervention, but there's lots of different ways that we can hope to overcome that even at the point of cancellation and help with retention.
So take us through the challenges of retention in a SaaS or a subscription business. What's the status quo you see when you start working with clients, and where are they at that point?
Yeah. So I think with retention specifically, this has sort of evolved into a much bigger problem. So everyone has been pretty familiar with the struggles of like Netflix and Peloton, especially lately in that retention space, but it's really been happening over time. So early on and when SaaS was really exploding, getting popular, it was all about acquisition. Acquisition was much cheaper. People were just trying to fill the top of funnel and then sort of, letting churn happen and do things. And then you've seen sort of the evolution of customer success as a group within a company and an integral part of any company's success at this point. And with that that's because retention has just, from a matter of additional competition and more expensive keywords, things like that, has really been a better path towards growth. So it's actually about 5 times cheaper, at least on average, to retain a customer versus acquire a new one. And then really that's what we've seen here. So, and then in terms of status quo, when we're usually starting to work with customers, I would say a small majority might have some sort of like exit survey where they're just kind of getting some basic feedback. And then a much smaller number, I would say, less than 5% actually do any sort of like active retention offers or coupons or incentives to stay. So that's what we're usually walking into, is usually a space where there's no solution in place. And that's just a product of the size of the company that we're working with. They just don't have the resources on their own to build a really kind of sophisticated, thought through system, because they're focusing on their own core product. So we're coming in and trying to, give them sort of a world-class experience without having to spend the resources that an enterprise company like Adobe or LinkedIn would have to spend to get it.
What I really love about this is you mentioned it earlier, that this idea of a cancellation experience. Most companies, like you said, they just, okay, let's just send a survey out. We lost them. Maybe we'll try to get them back with an email campaign in 6 months or something like that. What's really interesting is I'm seeing the work that you're doing in this space and that focus on the cancellation experience. And Betsy and I, over the last few podcast episodes, have talked to people who are focused on the buyer's experience. So it's fascinating to see how customer experience went from like a support thing to now it's expanding really into the whole life cycle of the customer. So I'm excited to see where this goes for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you touched on it, it's really the customer department now has expanded just beyond support, and it touches really everywhere. And we're big believers that, just because one organization in the company might own churn or might own LTV doesn't mean it's their responsibility. It's an organization-wide sort of mentality, customer-centric mentality, and it needs to start at the top and kind of go all the way through in order to have a truly successful customer-centric organization.
Tony, I'm not sure if you can answer this question, but I'm going to pose it anyway. What do you find to be 2 or 3 of the most successful tactics for keeping somebody from a company from churning?
So we always try to present an offer that really speaks to the pain point the customer is saying. So if it's really a pricing issue, and if there's pricing flexibility, we'll try to encourage people to offer that. If it's just that they don't need it right now because consumer behaviors change, maybe it's a seasonal type of business, we always encourage to do pauses. So the 2 most effective strategies that we've seen are definitely coupons, and then also pausing a subscription, which is a lot better than, a lot of times with subscription businesses, and a lot of people can attest to this, the hardest thing to do is to get someone to put a credit card in and actually pay you money, right? So whatever you can do to prevent that credit card from leaving and having them to re-enter it is a good thing.
Does that depend on the industry, or is that pretty much agnostic to the industry?
In terms of the effectiveness of the strategies? Yeah. So it definitely does depend. I would say those generally are the 2 most successful ones, but the rate at which they're accepted will depend on the industry and the ultimate end user of the customer. If it's a pure consumer, you probably are going to have a slightly higher acceptance rate than if it was more of a small to mid-sized business, just because of the nature of the way decisions are made, right? The consumer has kind of all of the power to make that choice right then and there. Whereas in a business environment, the person canceling might not actually be the one making that decision. So that just lends to a slightly lower amount. But it usually balances out because a consumer product is going to be, relatively speaking, a little bit less expensive, whereas a business product will be a little bit more expensive. So you can have a much lower rate of success, on the retention plays to really justify the cost.
So you talked about some of the data you collect. I know you guys have a process you go through. Can you give us an example of what that looks like? And then how does that data actually get kind of put back into the business? What's that feedback loop and what do they do with it?
Yeah. So all of the data we're collecting goes into, the ProsperStack kind of app and platform. So the same place where our customers are building the really interactive, customized experiences for their users and their offboarding flows. There's other views in there that are leveraging that data. So some really great data that we can show is that because we're tied into these billing platforms, is we know if we're able to save a customer, are they still an active paying customer? And then every time that they pay you again, we're adding that up into sort of a total. So we can measure things like how long they're there after the save, what your peer ROI is. We also measure outcomes of all of your cancellations, what we call sessions. So it might be that the customer does end up canceling, but it could also be that they were saved or deflected through a more educational means without conceding revenue, or that they just abandoned the cancellation flow, and then we might consider them an at-risk customer. So we can try to flag churn ahead of time for our customers too. So there's just some insights, but there's a lot more. You can basically run reports over time and then drill it down into the segment of customer just to know, exactly what that is. And what's really great about that is that a lot of times we'll start engaging with like a customer success or a growth team as our entry point into an organization. But by the time it's deployed, it's really cool to see that like a product team might be in there because they want to look at the feedback they're getting and see if they can correlate that to anything on the roadmap and justify the roadmap. So they can look at how many dollars or customers they've lost because of this particular reason that they're citing. It might be a marketing team that's in there because they want to make sure that the messaging that they're using on the front end is still resonating on the back end, that they're not over promising something that really isn't there, that the value isn't there, so they can better define their ICP. So it's just really neat to see organization-wide, different departments that can use the data.
I love when this happens, and occasionally it happens with guests that we've had on our podcast where they have a solution that really does infiltrate the whole organization. And I just think that's such an awesome thing. And the other thing that comes to mind is, why would companies not do this? Like it just seems like such a no-brainer. When customers come to you and say, we want to talk to you about your offering, what's their mindset? I mean, have they in general, I know not specifically, but are they panicking because all of a sudden they're paying attention to their churn, or are they trying to get out in front of it? What's the general mindset of people when they find you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the most common is kind of a reaction. So it's that churn has maybe crept up and finally become enough of an issue in the organization that they want to do something actively about it. And we don't ever try to sell ourselves as like a one-stop shop to solve all your churn problems. There's plenty of other things that you need to do. We just happen to be a very low-hanging fruit that gives you very tangible results in a short amount of time type of solution. So yeah, we're big believers that everyone should be doing something like this, whether you're building it yourself or using it through a service like we are. But yeah, I think a lot of times it is reaction driven. It's that the organization has determined that this is the time that we need to address churn finally. But certainly we get some early companies that might be churning 10 or 20 customers that just say, hey, we just want to get ahead of this and make sure that we have a solution in place that can scale with us as we grow. And we're not going to just let LTV walk out the door.
And did you say your entry point's usually customer success?
Yeah. So within the subscription world, there's lots of different subscription type businesses. So we tend to work with SaaS, of course. That's where a lot of my background is in an industry I hope to understand a little better than others. But there's also like the box, B2C market. There's like digital newspapers and online magazine subscriptions. There's like kind of the emerging video market where everyone's going to direct to consumer with, channels, things like that. So there's a lot of markets that we certainly identify. So within those type of situations, we tend to work with customer success and growth teams as kind of our entry point. And I think that's just natural because they tend to own those metrics that we're really focusing on, which is churn and LTV. And then, like I said, once we get in the organization, it does tend to kind of spread out into other areas of the organization as well.
So what would you say is the most surprising thing your clients learn? Some of the stories that you might have around that where clients are like, we had no idea that was happening. We only saw it because of the data you provided. Yeah,
I would say one really kind of neat bit of feedback that we got was we were working with we still are working with a subscription company that has an app, and they drive a lot of their subscription through the web. And I was working with a revenue ops person, and they knew in their head, or at least they thought they knew, that their pricing was kind of out of whack with what the market was wanting and things like that. So when they implemented ProsperStack, he was really looking at it from a data perspective. Obviously, retention was great, and anything else they could do to save customers was a bonus. But he really wanted to be able to go up to the C levels and say, I have the data now to justify what I've been telling you. So let's act on it. And he was able to do that within about 3-4 months of using ProsperStack. He took the data, ran the report, said these are what the actual customers are saying, and was able to recommend and implement price changes to their product that better aligned with what their customers were willing to pay. So that was a great bit of feedback that we got. And ultimately, like kind of the closing bit of feedback was that, because of that, I consider you guys the best investment we made this year, because I was able to justify all these things that I couldn't previously do that everyone needed data to prove.
Well, I think that's such a relevant point for where we are right now. I know this might date us a little bit, but we're heading into a recession potentially here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Still arguing if we're there yet or not, but
right.
But we're going to see retention across all kinds of businesses become an issue over the next several months here to the year. So I'm curious, like, do you have any businesses that you think, just based on your experience, might see greater retention issues over the next several months than others? Yeah,
and I think we saw a little bit with this, although probably more widespread when COVID hit, which is ironically when we actually launched our product. So when we launched our product, this was top of mind with people, and a lot of things that we heard then that I hope we don't hear now if we are heading into recession and start seeing customers churn, is that I wish we had a solution in place when this event happened, because they weren't able to react and give different offers and incentives and actually identify reasons people were leaving COVID related to do that. And I hope that doesn't happen again coming into recession. So I think the industries that are going to be most affected early on will be probably more business to consumer type goods services that, maybe are more of a nice to have than a have to have. So subscription services, maybe box services that are, just something that someone can cut out of the budget if they are starting to feel the pinch a little bit more. So those are the areas that I think might be more affected on the short term.
What do you see, Tony, as like in a perfect scenario when somebody comes to you? What would you want them to be thinking about? What would you want them to know? What questions would you want them to ask you that defines a really ideal working relationship between ProsperStack and the companies that you work with?
Yeah, I think a really good starting point for anyone that we're starting to meet with and they start asking us questions is understanding, how the integration works. So we are tying into their billing platform and like basically hooking up to their cancel button essentially. So as soon as their end user clicks cancel, that's where ProsperStack kind of pops up and takes over. So I think that's one key point, is to understand that. And then number two is to understand how are we going to be able to help them optimize their flow for data collection and retention. So what's great is that part of our services that we provide are really consultative as well. And a lot of times our customers want us to tell them like what are best practices. So we've dissected hundreds of leading cancellation flows out there from all kinds of different brands, probably ones that you've interacted with in the past. And we've come up with like an overlapping best practice template that we include in our software for everyone to use. And then we work with them on a one-on-one basis often, especially early on in their relationship, to really optimize that process. Tell them what offers tend to work the best. What percentage do you need to discount? What term do you need to pause for? What service interventions can we bring in based on the feedback you're getting? So those are some great things that we start to have early conversations about with our customers that I always recommend asking.
I love that you have a product and a service. I like the consulting piece of supporting your customers with the product that they buy from you, the technology that they buy from you. I think that's so important versus here's our solution. Good luck. Hope it goes well. I just think that's really the way it should be, honestly.
Yeah. And for us, it's all about getting our customers to a point of ROI and value that they, want to be long-term partners with us on this. And we just look at it that our advice and the data that we can leverage from what we've seen work and not work can get them to that point much quicker. So it's just really an investment on both of our parts to get to a better place for a long-term partnership.
Well, and you have the advantage of having a really direct way of proving ROI to your customers. I mean, I would think that would be a good retention thing for ProsperStack to be able to say, this is how much we helped your bottom line because these people didn't leave.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like a lot of times when you buy software, you have to buy into the idea that this is going to save me this much time, which is this many hours, which equals this many dollars per month, which isn't quite as tangible as like, hey, you've actually paid us this much money and you've actually saved this much money, which is actual real dollars that correlates back to their billing system. So I think we are fortunate that our ROI is still very clear and tangible as well.
So your solution is on the tactical level and very effective in that realm. Do you see it having any influence on the culture of the organization? Do they start to think differently about retention and maybe product development and those types of things as well?
Yeah, I think, certainly leveraging the data we collect is going to help the organization from that point on. So yeah, like you said, product coming in. I also think it can also be looked at as an extension of the mindset of the organization. So like, are you willing and wanting to get that feedback? You can't just, kind of close your, plug your ears and not want to hear. So by putting these sort of things in there and asking for much more detailed feedback and maybe doing conditional follow-ups and really drilling down is, just having someone select the option, you're missing a feature. So now I'm going to cancel. But now doing a conditional follow-up and saying, what features are we missing? Maybe we have a predefined list that we've heard about before. Can you let us know if any of these are, resonating with you? And then leveraging that data and maybe being willing to say, I was wrong. I didn't anticipate that this is our need of our customer, but they're telling us this. So we need to now hear this. So I think you have to be willing to accept that sort of stuff. And I think the best companies are kind of using this as an extension of their mindset already.
So Tony, let's talk a little bit about, you're doing things for your clients, customers. Talk about ProsperStack. Tell us about your culture at ProsperStack, how you engage with your customers, the things that really matter to you, and also what's next, and tell us about what's on the radar.
Yeah. So, ProsperStack, we're a couple years old now. So we have a handful of employees. We anticipate being around 10 within the next 6 or so months. So we're excited about the growth we're having. But I think some of the things that we try to do internally that we extend to our customers is that we really want to engage not only with our employees, but with our customers regularly and just listen. We try to make sure that everyone in the organization or using our platform has a chance to have a voice and tell us what they want to get out of it. So I think it's always important to be aligned on both ends of that spectrum. So for example, that might, in like an end user scenario, that might translate into like a manager might only care about high level details about what we're doing. So maybe they just want to care like, how much have you improved our retention? What's our save rate? What's our deflection rate? But the person actually using the product, which might be, a customer success manager or a growth person, might be more concerned about, something that they want to build in the flow or other reports that are there. So we just need to make sure we're listening to everyone that is engaging with our platform or everyone that's in our organization, whether it's someone in sales or in development, and just listen to their needs and make sure that we're, trying to meet them as best we can. And I think that goes both ways internally and with our customers.
So where do you see the kind of category that you're in going over the next 2 to 3 years? It's obviously a relatively new space. Mm-hmm. So where do you see it expanding? What do you see some of the opportunities that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen more people coming into the space. I think the continued growth of the billing platforms are creating not only in like just our specific niche of retention right now, but other areas of automation too. So they've got great, stable, mature, high growth billing platforms that have a lot of customers that you can leverage, and they have marketplaces that help you reach them too. So I think from that perspective, that will continue to grow. And on the retention side, we see ourselves, at the end of the day, we want to be kind of the go-to retention suite for an automated retention and churn management. So we definitely see ourselves going to other areas of the life cycle of the customer and applying sort of the same ideas that we have that we're using now into retention for those areas as well.
Gosh, this time has gone very quickly. Thank you so much for all the insight into the product. One of the things that we like to do on our show is give our guests an opportunity to give a shout out to a nonprofit or charitable organization or something that you're involved with. And we drop that information in the show notes. Is there any organization that you'd want to give a shout out to?
My brother, Andy, and his partner, Kate, actually own and operate a nonprofit called the Zen Donkey Experience out of the Kansas City area. And what they do is they actually serve children with unique and diverse abilities and help to improve their quality of life through equine assisted skill development and therapy. And they specifically do that with a connection through rescued donkeys that they actually have on their farm. It's an amazing place that they've created. I'm fortunate enough to be able to go and visit and see, the work that they do firsthand. And I just am so a big believer in what they're doing.
That's awesome. Tell us again the name of it.
Yeah, it's the Zen Donkey Experience. And then you can find them at zendonkeyexperience.org. And they have a sister company, zendonkeyfarms.com.
That's amazing. I've not heard of something like that. That's really awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
I really enjoyed this. I think the one thing I'd reiterate is I really love the fact that you're going into the cancellation experience. I like that that's your mindset around this whole thing, not just, gosh, people are going to cancel, let's see if we can save them, right? Let's build a real experience around it. So I'm excited to watch you guys and see how you guys continue to grow this.
I certainly appreciate the time as well, Tony and Betsy. It was great to be on. Great chatting with you. And let me know if I can be of any help down the line.
We will definitely be watching your success. I'm sure Tony and I both share the notion that you're going to be wildly successful with this. So thanks so much for your time and for joining us and for sharing your insights. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks again. Bye.
Bye.
Betsy, I love this episode with Tony because he talks about the data side. You know, I'm a data junkie. I admit it. I will never recover. I'm sorry. But what I love about it is that they're pulling in data and building these flows, these workflows where they're able to understand what is the real reason at the moment of cancellation. What is it people are thinking about? What is it that the company could potentially do better? You know, whether it's some drop down boxes of, are you missing features, or whether it's, you know, is a coupon going to help them? And it's not like every customer gets the same flow. That's the beauty of this. I mean, it is truly customized for that, what they know about that customer from previous interactions that the company's had. They feed that data in. So it's making a very personalized cancellation experience. And it's odd. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this idea of a cancellation experience. But the truth of the matter is, when someone makes the decision, you know, they go hit that cancellation button. Most companies don't do a good job because, and I've taught this in my customer experience courses for years. The first thing you have to do at that moment is listen. You let them, you actually take it back. You don't listen. First thing you have to do is allow them to press the cancel button. And if that's, you know, you're on a phone call as an example, you say, okay, let me get you started in that process. And as you're in that process of starting to implement the cancellation and from the customer's perspective, that's when you start asking questions. Well, can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on? Right. So if you're not in the SaaS world or subscription world, you can do the same types of things that Tony and his company are doing. What I love is that they've automated because so much is going to the subscription automation type of platform. They build that in for you. And so I really love that. If you're not having or haven't developed a cancellation experience, no matter what your business is, you've got to do that today, because as we head into an economy that looks like it's going to shrink for a little bit of time, then you need to keep every customer that you possibly can, that you can serve well. And you want to learn what they need, and you're going to want to learn how you can develop for future customers as well, because that's where the product design questions. We don't have this feature. Oh, we need to get that feature in here. How do we move that up the pipeline or up the roadmap? So I'm really excited here, stumbling over my words, because I really do love what I heard today. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. I mean, this is a great place to be.
Yeah. And, you know, one thing that just came to mind is I recently had a very bad cancellation experience, could not get to the cancel button. And it was a subscription. It was a very well-known business newspaper, leave it at that. But I could not get to the cancel button. And I spent so much time just even trying to find a phone number, the cancel button. And now I have a bad impression of the company. And so the brand equity, the brand loyalty, those kinds of things can often be greatly impacted by the cancellation experience. And so to your point, you know, help them get there, listen to them. And they probably could have saved me in this particular experience I just had. But now I'm like, well, I'll never sign up for that again because it was too hard to get out of it. So the downside of the brand loyalty can really be a high impact, I think.
Well, and I want to hit on this from a psychological perspective for a minute, because there is a concept that comes out of psychology that we often use in customer experience. It's called peak end experience. And what essentially the premise is, what humans remember, we don't remember everything in our experience. We don't remember every moment of the journey that we went on. We remember the peaks or the valleys of emotions. So the really high emotions positively or really low emotions negatively. And we remember the end experience. And so what you're just describing is, I had a really bad ending. And if I had a bad ending, I'm not going back. And my guess is, just from how you worded that, you probably canceled. We haven't even talked about why you canceled, right? But you probably canceled, and it was really not at this time. It wasn't a forever cancel. And that's what a lot of companies don't realize, is that most of their customers are probably not, or a good portion of them at least, are not saying forever. They're just saying, just not right now. That's where that kind of pause comes in that Tony talks about, right? Can I pause for 6 months?
Candidate for a pause. I would have been
exactly
a candidate because honestly, it was just, I don't have time right now to read it. But that doesn't mean forever. Just right now at this busy season, I don't have time to read it. I would have been an excellent candidate for a pause. Now I'm like, I'm never signing up for that again because it's too hard to get out of. So what a great conversation. I really enjoyed that. I meant it when I said, I can't wait to see what they do because I think they're going to be wildly successful over at ProsperStack. And so with that, thank you so much to our audience for joining us. We are so grateful. If you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, please do. We really appreciate you and your feedback on the show. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on the Really Know Your Customer podcast. See you, Tony.
Thanks, Betsy.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Really Know Your Customer. We hope you gained a lot of value from being here today. If you want to learn more about the work Betsy and Tony do to help their clients thrive, visit Betsy at thecongruitygroup.com and Tony at tonybodo.com. See you next time on the Really Know Your Customer show.